So hi ladies and gentlemen, it's Dave Dobbs here. It's Monday, 3rd of June. And I've got an interesting video for you today. It's probably going to be a bit of a long one. So I've got the tour up behind me. It's my friend's place actually, and there's another picture up there before. Klimt or something like that. I can't remember how to say the name, but it was quite an erotic picture. I don't know if you remember the picture that was up there before, but he wanted to take that away because I think there's lots of change going on down in this yard at the moment. Lots of change everywhere, right? But got the tour up there now. Ironically, the tour is out that window there, but you can't see that right now. But it's due west of where I'm. Sorry, due east of where I'm sitting right now. So an interesting message because I haven't made a video for quite a while, and I've been kind of sitting on the end of my head on the edge of my seat, waiting for what we might get, because truly I haven't known. I've got the image up here. I'm going to do the overlays after this. After this, actually, I can see it here, and I'll put it up on screen. But in my last video, I explored the concept of whether we were following a sun that was heading south or north of where we're going, or where we are right now. Whether we're sort of whether we're all trailing upwards or we're all trailing downwards. And we explored this concept of this second object because we'd had a sighting. We'd had another sighting of the pair, and we've had quite a few now. And I have made a calculation. Actually, I've made well, I don't know if it's an amazing calculation, but I'm going to take you through it today because I worked out, for those of you who are waiting for me to finally calculate it, and we could have guessed it, but I'm not down with too much guesswork at the moment. I'm just down with astronomical sightings, seismology, volcanism, and all those sort of things that go with it. Crazy storms, and we've just had nearly 500 storms about in tornadoes in America, and what tornado season began yesterday. It's pretty crazy times, isn't it? And we just had an 8.0 earthquake in North Peru on the 26th of May. So we've got some quite exciting data coming in. Now, I'm going to take you through how I'm going to tease you. I'm going to take you through how I got to the second object's kind of orbital period, orbital duration compared to Earth. So here on this diagram here, for example, okay. Now notice that here, here I've got two objects, haven't I? I've got. You can see here we've got two red rings, one representing Nibiru, the bigger one representing Nibiru. This is working on the assumption that the sun is heading south, down, not up. All our kind of models are on. Current models are that it's heading north, but actually not at the angle you would expect, not the reverse of that at all. In actual fact, it's supposedly heading at a completely weird angle, contrary to the kind of like the rings. Imagine if the rings were following along, you'd expect that to be the direction the sun was moving, sort of thing. But apparently not by our current understanding of the way the sort of solar system moves. Not by the Copernicus model, this kind of standard ecliptic plane model. And so we're all challenging that. We're all coming out, I think, of this old it's like a page 3 model walking through the door, and you're not amazed by, I'm talking about the Sun newspaper here. The old days they used to have a page 3 model, and she'd always have her kind of breasts out. And imagine if the sort of like the page 3 model walks through the front door, she's got her breasts out, and you're absolutely amazed, but you're not amazed that by her breasts or anything else like that. You're just simply amazed that she's 3D. And that's kind of what we're in at the moment. We're in this kind of point that we're coming out of this kind of 2D idea of the universe and indeed our solar system, and coming to a 3D idea, and realizing that all these things are kind of spiraling through each other. That this is all a spiral motion. Everything is a spiral motion, not just a flat plane. It's a flat plane taken into 3D, which is spiraling. Trailing behind, it's funny. The system I use to experiment at the moment with the 3D motion of our solar system is actually called Universe Sandbox. It's a game, but you can sort of set up all these variables and use the kind of jargon that we use in kind of astronomy to kind of like build solar systems and do experiments and runs. And first thing you realize, obviously, is a 3,600 year orbit doesn't exist at all. It just can't. It's just too big, and it's just gone. Orbital mechanics splits into two camps, really, as far as I can see. It's either it's open and closed orbits. It's gone and it's not coming back. It's gone and it's coming back. It's kind of like a binary rule of this sort of like or indeed the, not just of seeing more than 90% of every kind of like every big mass observed out in space, but it seems to be the fundamental rule of the universe, and that's true of us too, including this little question of whether the sun is going up or down. I'm not suggesting it's going down at all. I'm actually of the mind it's going up, straight up, and even though the reason I keep it going down there is because I'm challenged by the kind of images from the Carlos Ferradas model that I'm not too sure whether it's sort of saying go up or down. Truly, it's difficult to say. I've experimented with both, and I can get similar results with both, in actual fact. So it doesn't challenge us so much, other than that, we will not have our full zodiac understanding and be able to build this, because now we've worked out the second orbit, which I'm going to take you through. We can build the whole structure of our solar system now, if we also understand that quite possibly and very realistically, the blue kachina and Jupiter are one of the same thing. Where I don't know if this is where Steve Olsen is heading, of the big WSO channel that has been a massive, massive follower of Planet X for a very, very long time, but he's been showing sensational images and overlaying what seems to be this big blue kachina thing that we keep seeing over the top of Jupiter. And I've shown it in a few of my videos, and it's a very brave thing for him to say, because he's putting himself obviously on the line, because he's challenging the kind of standard model if he is going this way. And I sense he's at least kind of like, he's definitely, and Steve's, we've all had to choose our different ways in this, and Steve has very much been not middle of the road, but he's had to be very unjudgmental, because he's opened up a channel for many people. Came in as a total Christian, really, as a Christian channel. No, that's a bad thing, because we all come in whichever way we come into this. Our research takes us on the journey that it takes us. We can't change these sightings. We just have to calculate them and see them. And so we could see that quite possibly the blue kachina has if we're told that Jupiter has a 12-year orbit and we observe these patterns every 12 years, then we can assume that, because Planet X is traveling so unbelievably slowly, it never goes that far away. It comes around about every 189 years, and we can charter it all the way. The Carrington event that we saw in, 1859, all of these things are characterized, and then going back, to the sort of like, as I always go through, the big kind of like the big flood in Somerset, and I mean, obviously the Tor and all around the Tor was already a dock anyway, so we're talking about that was already the sea, but the the areas around that, the areas around and around Wales, flooded on what we would say, what would have been 1607 now because of the Gregorian calendar, but 1606, 20th of January 1606, or 30th of January 1607 on the Gregorian calendar. But all these areas have been massively affected by this. We've seen these cycles of this going round and round and round. We put all these different things into the orbital mechanics of these systems that we can now use that are available, and we can clearly see that it's not possible for a 3,600-year orbit. It's just a stupid thing. It just makes it a lot far away, very, very far away in a distant kind of galaxy sort of story, isn't it? And it's all here. It's all now. It's all happening right now. And the big question of whether the sun is going up or down, and it is the real question. It's the last piece of this, really, for as far as I can see, is whether the sun is going up or down. And that is, unfortunately, the kind of dynamic that we are all choosing right now. That is what we're calculating within our own selves of where we are going vibrationally right now, that same question. And I've got a funny feeling as we come to this last part of this hurdle. So before we go to, let's give you the second Nibiru's. I'm going to call it, without any offence to whatever this object's real name is, I'm going to call it for this moment. I'm going to call it, because Alex Lujan often calls them the twin, so I'm going to call it Nibiru's twin. But just think, about this 13-day, because I've had to wait over this period and see what happens, because that's the only thing we could do. We just needed another earthquake and another kind of and another sighting to triangulate this last object. And of course, that's what we've just had with the earthquake we've just had, which ironically was, it started on May the 4th last year. That was Kilauea going off and lasted for about 4 to 6 weeks, but the most intense eruption of it, it began around about the 4th of May and it just carried on. So we were running parallel to it. So you can see where this one arrow, 2 second green arrows here, the bottom of this inner red ring, we would have been meeting at this point here. You see, this whole ring would have been, this blue ring, as in Earth's orbital track would have been heading down with the sun or up with the sun, depending on which way you believe the sun is moving. And this ring would have been traveling across. Remember, it never really crosses, the actual dwarf planet itself never really crosses, as I'm understanding, it never really crosses the ecliptic at all. Only these two objects here actually end up crossing the ecliptic, Nibiru and Nibiru's twin. And so when we reached this point, we had the big sighting or the big earthquake on the 8.8 on the 27th of February 2010. And then we go 1 year and 13 days later, and we come to the 11th of March 2011, where we get Fukushima. Now, remember, in the last video, I talked about how we can literally equate to there was literally an earthquake the day of Chernobyl that was on the same line that travels down the same fault line that travels all the way from the Himalayas. It was in Dharamsala on the 26th of April, 1986, same day as Chernobyl. And then obviously you had the big earthquake on the 30th of August, a little bit later. So we know there was massive movement, and it's listed as a small movement, and yet 55,000 a small earthquake, 6-ish, something like that. It's minor, really, for considering that it's done so much damage. 5,500 homes destroyed. I mean, it's just like, guys, we are desperately trying to cover up earthquakes and volcanoes. And remember, in the last video, I mentioned all the different things. The water going red, and the big earthquakes, and everything else like that. But remember, Kilauea went off on the in 1986 as well. That's when it started erupting last, and so it's not counted as a volcano last year. Say, oh no, that's part of the 1986 volcano, so we'll strike that off the list. We're going to strike that off the list. And when we look at the actual melt that's going on around the we've got 29 new volcanoes around around Antarctica. All the melt that's happening on the snow is around Antarctica. All the all the volcanoes going off around right around the Pacific Basin on the the Ring of Fire, circling the whole Pacific. They're all going off. They're all active. Then you've got there under the Pacific. You've got sort of like you've got from the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is the arm that comes down from Russia in between British Columbia and to the what would it be to the east, and then to the west, Japan and what have you, and coming down there. And it's just like between that little arm that comes down from Russia, and is joined that whole ridge is the Emperor Hawaiian Seamount chain that runs down to Hawaii. It was only came on the map in 2001. That entire volcano, that underwater seamounts they call it, they're all active. They're boiling the oceans from underneath. We've got massive heating of the Pacific, and people could see me as a climate change denier, but I can definitely see the climate is changing. I can definitely see that. I'm not saying it's not global warming, and I'm not saying it's not climate change. I'm saying it's Pacific boiling. The Pacific is being massively heated. And of course, the whole basin, in my opinion, is actually brand new. It's really relatively new compared to most of the rest of the mantle, because of a big geological change that happened there a long time before, which is evident when you look at that whole curtain shape that is at the very top of the Emperor Hawaiian Seamount chain, the rip, the massive tear that has clearly occurred that has enabled this whole formation of the entire Pacific Basin in one fell swoop. And obviously the massive breaking through of magma, the wave of magma that has busted through between Antarctica and the bottom of South America. We've got all this evidence that we've got massive heating as a result of this very thin volcanic mantle that is relatively new, that is, and that's why all the earthquakes seem to happen around Chile and Peru, is primarily because you've got that massive mantle of a very dense rock hitting a completely different substrate, which is all basalt, and it's very thin next to a very dense point. You can imagine that as those oceans move and you get these seismic changes, that's where the shifts occur. That's why it's so obvious that it's going to go there. It's going to be one of the first places that go, and then movements are going to spread out from everywhere else. So it's piddling down with rain, as you can hear, and it's kind of distracting me. I don't know what the sound's going to be like, so I'll have to kind of like... going to fill the water containers anyway. Whew. I'm so anxious about everything at the moment myself. So overdoing this timeline. I think I feel the pain in my heart when I feel it. No, it's not what I can do about it. I was going to kind of like, I'm just going to take you through a whole different way then, and then suddenly there's just a wave of something that's just come through me, and just like, I think I'm just going to cut to the chase, guys. Actually, it's 101, 2, 3. It's 123 days. I stuck it into that program, Universe Sandbox. And what I did was I'll show it on screen as I'm saying this, but I run it from the 11th of March. It's a little bit later, actually. It turned out a little bit later in the end, because once I set it up, it jumped forward and I couldn't anyway. But it's roundabout. I'll show you when I start it up. But I ran it from just after 11th of March 2011, and I just put this ring here. Over the top, if you like, of Earth's ring, Earth's orbital track. and put them next to each other. And I wanted the alignment of the 11th of March 2011 and the next alignment point, which would have been on the 4th of May 2018, last year, when Kilauea started going up. Realizing that it jumps forward about 13 days. So you think, we had the sighting around about, Steve Olsen put it up and a few put it up of the flyby coming in around about the 14th of May. And then, of course, on the 16th of May, we had the oceans going red. But notice we didn't have the seismology there. No seismic. That came after, because we were seeing it coming in and going out. But we were behind it as it was coming and going out. So though we saw it coming to a closest point of the orbital track of Earth, it was actually ahead of us this time. It was 13 days ahead of us. May the 14th, we get the next sighting, and then the actual experience it on as being the closest aspect to it, except it had gone by then, but the tail was still there. So we saw the red dust on the 14th, which is 12 days, but you get the gist. I'm not trying to make this up. I'm just showing the absolute pattern. I'm just waiting to see what happened. I don't know if it's going to be a massive earthquake. I don't know whether we'd gone past this, whether this aspect here had gone and had gone past this aspect here. Now when we had the earthquake then on the 26th, 27th, we can realize that was actually the closest points. Earth would have been slightly more around here, and Nibiru would have been slightly further up here, but they would have been much further away at that stage. So though that would have been the nearest point of their crossing a bit ahead, which is why the earthquake obviously happened, the 8.0 happened around about the 26th of May, 10 days later, because it had to move another 10 days, and we'd moved another 10 days. To get to the actual closest points that we were astronomically positioning, not just the actual, because at one point we're talking about the closest points of our orbital tracks, and then the other points we're talking about the closest point of the bodies themselves. So we're talking about two different points, but nonetheless we had to experience both. Even this Universe Sandbox package, they've just really launched a new on the update. They've just launched a new model, which runs from 1919, which was the year of this eclipse, where loads of astronomers are gathered to look at stars and realize that they weren't in the right positions that they'd expected them to be in. And so it just confirmed Einstein's theory of of general relativity, that gravity bends light, which it probably does, and we know it does, but I'm not sure it does. We don't know anything actually about light, really. We're just beginning to understand, I think. We still don't know if it's a particle or a wave. We still don't know if we're here or not here, whether this is just some kind of massive manifesting realm of energetics, or whether it's actually what matter really is. Is it a particle or is it a wave? There's still so much we don't know, and we just throw our beliefs at every aspect of it. And so the blue kachina could very likely be Jupiter, and it's just been a massive cover-up, which means that would be a 12-year cycle, because it would fit into its own cycle, which means that Pluto on this new modulator, on this new Universe Sandbox model, they don't even include. I thought that was brilliant. And they built it on this day, like I said, they set it off on this day where they're just demonstrating that the stars aren't in the right places, as observed by astronomers, realizing, well, that's just because Einstein's theory of general relativity bends the light due to the gravitational energies. But it kind of just throws the, it's very convenient, isn't it? If it wasn't for Einstein's theories, it would mean that actually we are in a conical system. Of course, I don't want to look at that. But that I think they've subtly highlighted that, possibly by releasing their next show, because we don't know. We're just. I'm just showing you all the different patterns, haven't I? So we know what's coming up next, don't we? We know that basically we just passed that system. So we've passed one massive test, if you like. That part of the first cycle, Nibiru's twin, has passed us. Shiva and Parvati has gone by, and that part is done. And it's just this big object now, where it seems to be that we're going to go through will it get bigger or smaller? Will it be, we just don't know. We don't know. We know that last year, you remember when I made the video and I said that we were going to have an earthquake? I said prepare for, or be, I can't remember how I phrased it actually, but I said, I said that big tidal anomalies were kind of imminent. We had to accept that. It was coming up to that. We were coming into that August sort of time, but we'd seen it because, it was August 17th, I think, last year or something like that, that the timing came by. So it said it was going to come in September. And I sent the video and I was like, guys, we've been very confused about the kind of June and March, the May, June, and then March, April sightings. And it's just leading us into understanding that there is this second object, and we're just waiting for more sightings and more seismic data to tell us this, and then we can just piece it all together. It will just reveal itself to us. That also reveals to us that we're in a conical system. It absolutely reveals to us, because if that's in a conical system, these are affecting us at two different planes. These are two objects that are coming through, that are showing the absolute same patterns of coming through at this trajectory, heading straight towards where Jupiter is right now. Isn't that a bit suspicious? That Jupiter is right where this thing is absolutely heading. It's just absolutely in the perfect position for this coming up. Clearly, what Galileo saw was this thing. He didn't have a massive telescope. When he built a little telescope made of lead, it was just bound with a few lenses. It wasn't using kind of like anything. So it wasn't a Hubble or anything. It was the first telescope ever invented, as far as I understand. Well, first in the West, of course. But it's kind of like, we can't see what we're seeing here. So we saw what happened last year. I made the video and I said we were going to have the kind of like the tidal anomalies, and we saw the massive earthquake at the time, the earthquake and the tsunami that fell on the full moon. And so it seems that the full moon will amplify this for sure. Whatever stage this is going to be in August, September, we know we've got a massive flyby coming. We can't get around that, just like we couldn't get around it last year. But you saw that guy bareback riding his house being overtaken by his neighbouring hills in a liquefaction earthquake in Indonesia. The whole of Krakatoa blew its top off. Another earthquake that barely happened. Oh yes, it was a mudslide. A mudslide. The whole top of Krakatoa is gone. Unbelievable. That was obviously after, around about the second time of the second full moon, actually, where it again got or the third, I believe, actually, as it came round. It was close to November, wasn't it? So we had that kind of dip, and we're starting to understand that cycle much more now, as it sort of comes on this side, as it cuts through on this side and then comes back round and then comes up, or it's indeed going the other way around, depending on whether you're of a mind that the sun is going up or down. I am of a mind it's going up. I've only built this because Carlos Ferrada's model kind of more indicates it's heading down, even though I sense that he's overall, because of all the sightings we've had in the South Pole, I'm of a mind this system is in the South Pole, and or south of the solar system, and that. Is that right? In the south? It's so confusing. Even every time I throw my head at it, this is the thing. Every time I throw my head at it, you get it's much more complicated than you can ever believe to calculate. Because first of all, you've got so much bullshit science out there that's fed you, that has just regurgitated all these theories over and over and over again, all using fundamental lies at every juncture in this, or fundamental kind of shortfalls in our perspective, because we haven't had these kind of 3D models available to us. And we've been upholding this model just to conceal this massive system, because this massive system is what it's all about. This is what the fast as I was told in my own vision that showed me this whole thing and said, this is what the fast is all about. That's what literally the words I spoken when I saw it go flying by in my own dream, that kind of like, you know, as profound as it is. And where are we now? Where are we now in this? Now we kind of understand all this system. We understand the final bits. We just don't know. We're not too sure whether the sun is moving up or down. Some of us think we know. Some of us know. But proving it, absolutely, by all the different sightings and how we can position that in the 3D model that we're in, is actually harder than you could ever believe. And I'm getting lots of people sending me, Christina Lemont sent me some interesting images of a shot of how she's trying to calculate the position of at least whatever this sun simulator, or however that is, the distance of it, looking at the way the light hits the earth and these different angles. And I can see lots of you are out there trying to send me information on where you think it is. And I've got to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to review the comments, and I just emotionally haven't been able to take it either. So sometimes I have to just, because it's such a massive thing to turn around to tell you you're going to get massive earthquakes and volcanoes from during August and September. There's no way of getting around that. And I'm afraid it's going to be horrendous around December, January. There's no way of getting around that. Whether this system here, see, it depends on which way it depends on the trajectory of the sun, which way, whether this expands, whether this comes out and goes more into kind of like January the 20th or into kind of late December, where we're going to get that crossing. And this will be the same, whether it's going to be closer to August or September, because of our difficulty understanding the basic movements of our sun. And so all of our collective sightings all over these, if it's heading south, well, I mean, even then, I still have to throw so many different factors into this. I lay it out, and honestly, there's so many questions, and all I can do is just lay those questions bare to you and say, you're going to have to decide yourselves how you're going to navigate, where you're going to go, what you're going to do, how you're going to, most are never going to believe this, but I can absolutely categorically tell you that both Chernobyl and Fukushima nuclear disasters were started by this. There is no doubt, and I've shown you all the evidence, especially in the last video. I went into great detail to show you, and the only thing I could add to that is obviously that Kilauea did actually go off at the same time as well. So you've got all this corroborating testimony coming together, and of course you've got the sighting of Halley's Comet at the same time, and of course they've got the red dust coming down. I mean, guys, we're told that Halley's Comet is water-based. It's a water comet. That's why it has its big tail, and yet there we have the red dust, the iron coming down, which of course, goes into the water and sucks up all the oxygen, which kills all the fish, turns it into blood. That's what it is. I mean, sea is already kind of like it's like, it's got all these different nutrients, just like the blood has in it. And so fish life can exist in it. It is like a blood for them. And when you add iron, you've added the final ingredients, especially in sea. It's just exactly the same as blood, all the same constituency. So it looks just like blood. It is, for all intensive purposes, water with iron in it, lots of iron in it. It is blood. It's not just blood red. It's just insane. But that's what's happening when this stuff comes down. And we've seen it so many times, haven't we? We've seen it every time it comes in. Do you remember when all the Alps went red? And then, we see it dropping out the sky when this thing flies in. We went across Mexico on Trump's inauguration, and they're calling it El Dragon, and they see it, the big fist in the sky. And of course, in America, it's just a cloud. We can't see it. I can say it's going to be exactly like that, exactly that time. It's just a cloud. And then, of course, the big December flyby and the meteorites that we saw following it. You could literally see them twisting in space. And so where does it leave us, guys? We realize we can absolutely see without any shadow of a doubt that this ruptures nuclear power stations. We can see without any shadow of doubt that covering the Earth in nuclear power stations to to feed 1 billion new cars that are going to each cost 100, can consume 100 times more fuel than they're ever going to, in terms of fossil fuels to make these cars, then they're ever going to consume in their lifetime, to make all these new cars which are going to run off all these nuclear power stations, because it's just like, that's going to save the earth. When we can see that this thing ruptures nuclear power stations when it goes by, we can absolutely see. Can you see how this whole climate change story, unless we're willing to address the real problem going on, and we're just going to use it as a means to feed, to buffer and protect the nuclear industry and make sure that we build more nuclear power stations? Where's it coming from? Where's this driving force? We've been had by this story in the mid 80s, when Margaret Thatcher brought it all into place, the whole carbon story into place. And of course it was all to conceal the flyby that was happening then. And this same carbon story that is now reaching an all-time record high. Wal Thornhill from the Thunderbolt project would say the cherry on the top of the cake. The cherry, they're kind of like the cherry on the cake. What's on the top of this carbon spike is a massive, great plasma charge, and you would say that that's what makes up all the fault lines and the curves, all these lines on Mars. And I would say that that was massive water movement that did that, and that this was the result of a massive, massive great thunderbolt, and that's what's on the top of this massive great carbon spike. It reaches into this massive great, and I'm of the mind he's right. In many ways, that is what's on the top. That's what comes when we get the closest proximity, when perihelion between Nibiru and Earth occurs. You get this plasma charge. That's what I saw in my dream. They went straight past each other, but I just saw a massive charge going between the two. Massive. Massive. It was big. So I can imagine that would cause a massive, great, compression of the atmosphere when it goes over. I could see that, skyfall sort of situation, which would make very, very high winds wherever it occurred. I think it would almost be traveling too fast to pull the oceans up that much, to be honest with you, because it's just traveling too fast, too near and too thin. But seismically, I could imagine that would cause a lot. But then they're not touching, and they're traveling different directions. It's going to, electrically, it's going to obviously be a bit of a it's going to be a surge. It's going to be a surge. That's December, January, and that's both sides of this. That's August, September, and December, January. It's where does it leave us? Where does it leave us when we can absolutely see, and yet we ourselves can't change it, because most of us can't speak it up because we get shut down by our peers, by our friends. I'm not cool. Dave Dobbs is not cool at all. He's a complete one utter weirdo for seeing this. And what I've done is I've charted this thing, and it's been a full-on journey for me, especially because of the way the information comes to me. But where it leaves us is, in the very beginning of this, when I went off to South America to try and find a solution to this, because I was having a complete nervous breakdown, because I'd had this vision of seeing the most terrible things happen and seeing myself. I died in my vision. I got destroyed by whatever happened. And I won't go into that, but in that process, I was just left with unbelievable regret that I hadn't done anything. This sadness, this unbelievable sadness that left this dagger in my heart, and it took me such a long time. That's why I went to South America, to try and get that dagger from my heart, and try and understand that pain, where that pain came from. And I really feel sometimes that I'd known that pain in a previous life, that possibly, whatever the earth was before this big change that happened before the Great Flood, that possibly I was very involved in that, and I felt the tragedy of losing that. And maybe this has been my slow, long process in correcting that mistake myself. Maybe I'm an older Atlantean. I feel like I'm a very old Earth soul. I've been told I'm an older Earth soul, even though I'm told that I don't always reside on Earth. Which I seem quite likely because of other experiences that I've had along the way. But where it leaves us now is that the first message I was given was that, and I said, I just want to know what the fuck is going on. That was the question I put to the gods. It was the most rudest question I'd ever presented to the ayahuasca gods, and I presented it in the most polite way I can, but I had to kind of be blunt about the fundamentals of it. Do you know what I mean? And so I just had to lay it bare to them, and the answer I got was so unbelievably straight and direct, and it just said, put simply, your earth will no longer support duality. And obviously I talk about the whole Brexit thing and how I was told, that we face a choice whether we stay in Europe and weather the storm, or we cut our anchors and head west, and if we head west our fate is sealed. And I didn't understand any of that at the time. When I was writing a book saying it was about us leaving Europe and we shouldn't leave it, everyone was like, we're never going to leave Europe, you're mad, why would we have to leave Europe, and and I was like, no, we don't understand what they're trying to get us into. And it's just been this whole long process of seeing this free trade deal and seeing how we're carved up by a free trade deal. We surrender all our sovereignty to these private courtroom processes that cost billions, as I've gone through in so many of my videos, just trying to show you how this big process is, the big story that and I'm not trying to take away from all the environmentalists who've put so much into this. I know it seems, because I'm an environmentalist, I make so many mistakes as well. I drive an old Passat because I believe keeping the old ones on the road until we've actually come up with a free or clean energy solution that we can run electric cars, until we've actually crossed that threshold, done that. We cannot think about going into massive electric car production and nuclear power production. We are just feeding and frenzy of nuclear power stations. It's just the worst thing we can do, considering we've got 4 nuclear power stations split open. 3 we can categorically say that they were caused by by an earthquake. We know that the earthquake affected the whole globe, the whole axis of the earth shifted. Guys, come on, we have to bring an X into the equation in terms of an algebra kind of formula here and say, what the hell is X in this equation? What caused that? Can we just turn around and pretend it's some kind of heart machine where they can just, what pumps in and gives enough power to cause that kind of displacement of an ocean? You've got to think about it in a single moment. Yeah, you could come up with a large hadron collider. I do see that. But you're still talking about an immense amount of energy that shifts the whole planet, guys. Just in the fundamentals of kind of like of energy. You can't destroy it or create it. You can only move it from one place to another. And we kind of relate to that, I don't believe in free energy. I just believe that there is just abundant energy everywhere. We're all just dragging the coal to Newcastle. This was Tessa's whole message, that we're just surrounded by energy. We're just pure energy, surrounded by pure energy. It's everywhere. And so we come to this juncture. Where we realize that we have ourselves at gunpoint right now. We ourselves are holding ourselves at gunpoint, as if to say, I will not shut those nuclear power stations down unless what? Can you see? If those power stations are not dealt with and they erupt, the damage to this earth is just so fantastic, because other beings can't interfere in our process, or they enter into our karma. And you can understand from an outside perspective, technologically, we're seeming to be quite advanced, but actually on a vibrational level, what's happening, it's like the dark ages on earth right now. We have some pretty dark people at the helm driving you into a dire situation, because they want control of humanity. They want control of all the resources. And they're basically saying of the human beings that they control, they will not let these human beings see this. They absolutely refuse to see this. And they cannot understand how their own heads work and their own belief systems They don't know how to move through their belief system. Understand, Buddha was the scientist. Buddha was the scientist when he talked about the hungry ghosts. Einstein was the guru. That's what I tried to bring you in one of my first ever video, which was about the walk from the Great Flood coming from Mars. That was my first ever video. That was, in actual fact. And that's a big part of this story. The story that we can't see of what happened on Mars. The whole massive great grandfather planet it is. Its carbon footprint written into the zircon, covered all over the top of Mars. It had deep, deep, deep oceans on it once. And then suddenly all the oceans left. And this whole process that's unfolding now is humanity individually deciding whether it goes, I don't want to say up or down. It's a bit like our sun traveling in space. We can look at it in our silly little kind of Copernicus kind of standard flat static model and say south is down and north is up, but the universe, which is up and which is down, which is front, which is back, it's all down to interpretation. So it's just down to a choice of which direction really you want to go. All I can tell you is that, I'll leave the messages again. Remember me telling you in the last video about how the white cloud messages that my mum typed up for my father, or the messages my father channeled, and this lovely chap has put them up. I forget his name. I keep writing his name down, but I'll put his name down. Apologies for that. But I'll put all the lovely chap who's put it up. I'll put his email so you can get in contact with him, and maybe find out where you can leave some sort of like comments for his work and what he's put together. Because it would be great if something fed back for him as well, for all of his efforts of getting it up. Getting all my mum's work. I mean, she typed it all up, and he's obviously had to kind of redo that sort of stuff to get it back up there. So big blessings to him for all that effort. But I'll put that up because it's all this message. And one of the things, if I put planet into the search engine of that book, of the book that my mum put together, and or that they put together, and all the writings they put together, and it came up with this big purple planet. And he was talking about this big purple planet, and he was talking about this big golden planet. And I met someone the other day, and they said they'd had a whole experience with people that took you on journeys to the sun. Only in Glastonbury do you meet such wonderful people who take you on journeys to the sun. And this woman does this whole guided meditation. But I heard about it from another person who'd done this meditation with this woman. I'll leave the links for her channel. But she does these guided meditations to the sun. And this woman had this most incredible experience. A friend of mine had this most incredible experience. I love hearing about stories like that. But he talks about this golden, I know it's a white guy, talks about this big golden planet. And then it was so funny to meet this person that talks about these experiences, about these karma kind of judicators that live in the sun, that they can transform and move karma around at a request, but they need requests to do it because they can't just step in. And this is a big problem with the nuclear story that we're going here. But anyway, he talks about this big purple planet. And of course, when I'm trying to think what his name now, the guy that sent the Tesla into space. His name's just suddenly slipped out of my head. Apologies, but the car that's in many, especially the flat earthers, believe it never went up into space at all. And obviously, the Earth is flat and blah blah blah. But ironically, the images that beam back from the car, from the camera that only had a 6-hour battery life. I mean, kids are selling weather balloons in space for less than $100 and getting as good footage that the kind of like 300 million it costs to send a sort of like 6-hour kind of camera into space and completely lose the car. Of course, they shot it out to Mars, and guess what? It overshot and it's gone, because guess what? Mars isn't where they probably sent it, because let's face it, it's not out there. It's all in a conical system. It's all trailing behind. We're all looking down the tail of a massive system. We're not looking out on an ecliptic plane. And so it's all changing the whole model. This is why we're getting these shots of kind of Jupiter coming into place, because it's actually much further. It's down the tail. It's not out. You know, it's just like the whole kind of story that we're in is coming to readjustment and awakening. But we come back to this situation of up or down, or which way? Which way do we go? Imagine if we didn't realize we had a choice. Imagine if we just didn't know that we could choose. And it's who we are in this kind of whole frequency that's really choosing, but it's also engaging. Because there's going to be big opportunities for when this changes. You see, they're going to come in now. They have to come in now. They've got the whole planet at gunpoint. But the truth is they were always going to come in. They've been invited in. So for them, it's an invasion. And until they come in, they will not switch those nuclear power stations until they take full control of those bodies. They will not allow those nuclear power stations. They will just shout, "There's nothing you can do, Nibiru." Everything they can. That aspect of them will deny at every juncture. There's nothing you can do to stop this. There's nothing you can do. That's all they will be able to tell you. It's just that part of them speaking through. They're just a channel to that. We are all channels to ego. We are all channels to a higher space. We are all of these things. We are here for here building our castles in the sky by the experiences we have here. This is where the puppet masters come and get the puppets. These physical forms that we incarnate here are what we, just like you have DNA and RNA transcription in our cells, where our cells go into this kind of meiosis and mitosis, this kind of cell division. How we first of all we create like a transfer, a sticker that sticks across all of us and then comes off and reassembles itself. It has all the kind of like the substrate data for every part, every elemental, and every kind of like every piece of mineral and all the requirements in that kind of DNA chain. And it's just the kind of reverse sticker of it, which then attracts all those other relevant kind of DNA in the chain. And now we understand so much about why plasma is so present in the body, because it's the plasma that actually makes the kind of the helix formation that actually kind of invigorates this kind of RNA transcription that enables the kind of creation of the first DNA strip that creates the kind of like first form of the cell, which instructs the cell then to go into its formation and actually construct itself as a cell, as a whole cell. And imagine that's happening on a higher level. That process of cell division is happening on a much higher level, dimensionally, on a higher energetic level. And that's what we create. That's what we create here with all the passion, all the things that you love. And you've had many, many, many lives of creating on a higher dimension, building whole worlds above. So when you finally depart this world and you go to a higher dimension, it's everything that you've created in love and passion and beauty in this plane, all your very, very finest aspects, all taken to a higher place, all merged into one realm. And that's the realm that I was shown and had little glimpses of in process that it took for me to write Laughing Gas, all the kind of different dimensions, the kind of like, you know, the third, fourth, fifth and sixth dimensions that I take you through in that journey. And that's how I perceive them. And so I kind of start the journey on a whole crazy crack bender to try and create chemically, so you can not going to hit against your belief systems, third and fourth dimensions, especially fourth dimension, you know, kind of strung out come downs where you're massively psychically attacked, which drives you into taking more of the drug because you cannot handle kind of that type of ego tantrumatic bombardment of opening that and then trying to close the door to that monster. Lemon! And that's what unfortunately is at the door. And there's always new arrivals. So we're going to go through this process and they're going to come in now because it's the only way that we're going to switch those nuclear power stations off. I was hoping that the things were going to go in a different way with the whole Brexit thing, but unfortunately they're not. And so this all comes at a bit of a process, but you've got to think, I mean, what's the worst case scenario? You know, if you leave it to the gods, because like I say, no one else can come in and clean up that nuclear waste. That's our problem. We've got to be allowed to experience our own problems. This is free will on this realm. As a friend reminded me the other day, you know, it was this is free will on this realm, and we have the right to destroy this realm if we choose. And so, you know, the protection of this great shield, if we cannot sort that out, how would the gods sort that out for us? How do you leave it festering? Do you leave a broken nuclear power station festering so it kills everything slowly, deforms every bit of DNA on this, you know, on this globe over the next couple of 100 years, 1,000 years? It just decays. Thousands of people have to just sacrifice their lives to go in and clean it up because we can't be responsible now. We can see what's going on. How would you sort that out? How would you sort that out? You think about, you know, Tony Blair's war on Iraq, or NATO's war on Iraq. You know, thousands of times more radioactive waste generated by the Hiroshima bomb was dumped in the form of depleted uranium on Iraq. That's our current way of getting rid of the kind of nuclear waste coming out of the kind of power stations. Just like, oh, the whole thing, every aspect of this nuclear industry, every aspect of that which is subverting this earth with nuclear power, holding us at gunpoint. If we can't have you, no one can have you. That's the message, isn't it? And so this is the choice. We have to kind of come to this point now. And you know, the Colburn Bible says, as I say many times, which is the last great testimony, well, just after the great flood, when the dragon flew by then. It talks about the great dragon and the great many-bladed sword that protected us from the dragon. And then said that humanity isn't punished for the mistakes he makes. It's punished for the mistakes it fails to rectify. So it's another long message. It's choice time now. We're kind of in this whole thing. Can we turn this around? I don't know. Choice time. Who do you want to be in this? Take care.